Chi, not you girls. I'm a Chi Psi. Chi Psi has a GMU chapter, so I was curious if anyone here was. Are you all poli-sci majors or history majors? What are you all majoring in? Economics. Anybody here?
Criminology.
What'd you say?
Criminology.
Criminology. Anybody else?
I'm a history major with a minor in American government.
Okay, very good. Good for you.
Econ.
Well, Harry asked me to talk a little bit about majors. I was a poli-sci major at Rutgers, and I worked for my student newspaper. I was involved as a kid in politics, Democratic politics actually. I came from a very liberal Democratic family. And I put my interest in politics on hold when I became interested in being a newspaper reporter because for many, many years it was, for many, many years the press was very impartial and they weren't as partisan. And there were a lot of my fellow reporters who wouldn't even register to vote in the primary because they did not want the officials to know whether they were Democrats or Republicans. I mean, it was pretty common knowledge that the press was liberal, but so I put my interest in politics on hold. And then when I started my own publishing business in the area of the FDA, I started a newspaper business for a newspaper called the Star Ledger in Newark, New Jersey. And then I went to graduate school for journalism at the University of Missouri, because I didn't really have a lot of undergraduate journalism teaching. And so I started working in the trade press when I came to the DC area in 1985-86. And I liked it a lot. I really liked covering in this case, with the Food and Drug Administration. I had no background in science or anything. And I started my own newsletters in 1991. And it was a very, very good business, and it was good to be in business because then I had the time to be involved civically. And where I was living in Rockville, Maryland, we had the misfortune of living on a street with a lot of speeding and cut-through traffic. And so when my ex-wife, now my ex-wife and I had kids, we were very concerned about speeding. I tried to do something about it, and was blocked by the people in the neighborhood. They didn't want speed humps, you know, things that they could slow you down. So it kind of stuck in my craw, and I got myself involved with getting a road built called the Montrose Parkway. And it's now called the Josiah Henson Parkway. It's named after Josiah Henson, who was a slave at that plantation where the parkway was built, and he was the inspiration for Uncle Tom's Cabin. So I got really involved with politics at that point, and one of the things that I was quite disturbed about with the Democrats was this environmental extremism. Everybody who was against building this road, everybody was even against me having speed humps to protect my children and other people's children from traffic, were very liberal people. And they didn't want the road built. They were very ideologically against it. And there was a governor of Maryland at the time named Harris Glendenning who went out of his way to kill every highway he could get his hands on. His big thing was smart growth. And at the same time, the Bill Clinton scandal was occurring with Monica Lewinsky. And so between those two politicians, led me to be a Republican. And so in 2000, I cast my first vote for George W. Bush as a Republican. I never voted for a Republican president in my life, never. And I joined the Republican, I basically joined the Republican effort. I got a council member elected who was actually a moderate liberal Republican named Howard Dennis, who worked for Tom Davis. He was the congressman here for many years. And so I became a Republican, and I've been there pretty much ever since, and I started getting involved in Republican politics, and then we decided to move to Leesburg after 9/11, and I continued to get involved in Republican politics. And in Loudoun County, the Republicans were the party in power. They were the main thing back then. The Democratic Party was actually very weak. So I got involved with Leesburg town issues a lot because I'd already been involved with transportation stuff and land use, and being a journalist, I was able to, I actually had an ethical conflict over this. I actually talked to a friend of mine who was a Channel 4 producer, and I said, I really want to get involved with this stuff, but is it a conflict? And we had this long ethical discussion. This friend of mine who was a producer for Channel 4, he said, no, I don't think so. I think that you're not involved in a partisan politics while you're involved in an issue. But then, of course, I got involved with partisan politics, and but when I ran my publishing business and I covered the FDA, I covered it objectively. I really did. I did not bias my stories in favor. In fact, we wrote a lot of very negative stories about Bush and the FDA. We really did. And so we kept our objectivity, but on the outside, I was a conservative Republican, conservative activist, and I got very involved with Republican politics and Leesburg town issues. And finally, in 2006, I ran for office and I won. It was a council race with 9 people running, and I was one of the top 3, and I won by 38 votes. Out of, it sounds like a small margin, it is, but it was actually very few people who voted. And then I got on the town council, and I was intent on getting transportation moving and economic development, jobs, deregulation. You know, I was reelected in 2010, and even back then, Leesburg was pretty blue. It was purple, really. There was a lot of, it was very, very liberal Democrat areas. And I ran for the Board of Supervisors in 2011. I defeated a liberal Democratic incumbent, okay, who's now the mayor of Leesburg. And so I was on my way toward a career in politics. And when I think back as to how I got elected, it was because I was emphasizing bread and butter issues of concern to voters regardless of their party. Everybody gets caught in traffic. You know, people want quality schools. Never voted against a budget increase for the schools. Never voted against a budget increase for the schools. They wanted jobs, and they wanted. Have you been to Leesburg lately? Anybody been there? Does anybody remember what it was like 10 to 15? I guess that's too.
I still lived at the bottom during the time.
Okay.
So many years.
It was mostly antique stores and a lot of bad restaurants. Now it's an activity center, and it's because me and another conservative Republican friend of mine, an independent, and the mayor, who's now the supervisor, pro-business Democrat named Kristen Umstadt, we voted to deregulate the Board of Architectural Review and all these burdensome regulations. And so by the time I got to the Board of Supervisors, before you know it, all these restaurants are open and all these bars. And you know, Leesburg is now a viable downtown environment. People come from the Washington area to go to Leesburg for entertainment and stuff, so I was very proud of that. And we got roads built, and we also got Silver Line built. When I was on the Board of Supervisors, one of the things I was involved with before I got to the board was actually trying to kill Dulles Road. I was hired by some people as their activists, their grassroots PR person, and I was trying to kill the project. And when I got on the board, I was trying to kill it too in 2012, but then we came up with a tax district to pay for it that doesn't cost the taxpayers anything. It's just the business taxes. Taxpayers paying for it, and we built it. But I still get grief for that to this very day. So I left the Board of Supervisors, then I went back on the town council briefly. My wife and I, we separated, and I went down to Norfolk, Virginia. I got a job down at Virginia Beach. My business was failing at this point. It was really not doing well, so I wanted to work, and I got a job as a tech writer. So that's how I got pigeonholed as a tech writer, because I have a journalism degree and so forth. I mean, I have a lot of experience in management. I got a lot of experience hiring people, marketing, but it's all, you know, self-taught, so to speak. So I went down there, and that's when I became an Orthodox Jew. I'm Jewish by birth, just so you know. It's not I just, you know, but I became Orthodox as opposed to being conservative, which is where I was before. And it was a great thing for me to get involved with Judaism and becoming a better person. It really was. So I wrote a book on running for office, which I have here, and I would be happy to sell you a copy if anybody wants more reading to do when they're in school. But this is my book. This is half of it is on how to run for office, and half of it is how to serve. And I thought writing on how to serve was important because I know a lot of people who get into elected office and they think they know what they're doing, but they don't. Okay. So I didn't want to run again, but when I moved back here from Norfolk to Fairfax County, because my kids were up here, I have twins. Their pictures are in the palm card. I was helping other candidates. I was doing a lot of lecturing at the Leadership Institute and other venues, and I was encouraging people, run, 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 run. And around here, it is hard for a lot of the Republican units to find candidates. Anybody here want to run for office?
Be honest, everyone.
Good.
Brutally honest with yourself.
Good, then you need to buy my book. Okay, good. You need to buy it. I'll give it to you for $20. How's
Well, not the best.
Not too much, okay. Anyway, I take cash out. So anyway, so I decided that I was gonna run this year and put my money where my mouth is, and I'm now running for state senate here in this district. And I could have run for House of Delegates if I wanted, but I decided to run for state senate because frankly, I was extremely upset with a lot of the legislation that the Democrats passed in 2020 and 2021 when they were in control. And you may have heard of some of the things, but there's a lot of things that they passed that are really, really going to be burdensome and are going to force people to leave the state, business as well. And it's not very good. I can go into chapter and verse of some of the things that they did in the name of criminal justice reform or in the name of climate change or whatever. And when Governor Youngkin got elected in 2021, in my view, he helped save the state from becoming another New Jersey or Illinois.
The greatest insult you can get that state.
I'm from New Jersey and I can say it. Okay? I lived in Maryland for many years too, and Maryland hemorrhages jobs and people, and it keeps raising taxes on people, and it's just not, they don't invest in transportation like we do here. I mean, I can just go on and on and on about the failure of these so-called progressive policies, which I call regressive, because that's what they are. I mean, I was a poli-sci major at the time when the communism was still in effect, and a lot of the professors at Rutgers supported Marxism. They supported the command economy concept. Well, with Reagan and Thatcher and the demise of communism, I never thought I would see that socialists would be making a comeback. Never. In the name of democratic socialism. But when I was in Norfolk, I for some reason was getting the Democrat Socialists of America newsletter. And I read it. His previous tenant got it. And one of the things that they say in that newsletter is, well, we're not against capitalism, but we want eventually for businesses to come under democratic control. That's basically code for you want, nationalization of business. I mean, in the 1970s, there were Democratic officials, even some conservative Democrats, who wanted to nationalize the oil industry. They wanted to get rid of competition. Reagan came along and discovered that competition and free enterprise works. And that's really where the rubber meets the road. We Republicans are not against government, okay? And Ronald Reagan even said that in his 1981 inaugural speech. We want government to be small, limited, and work efficiently. And we want to use incentives to get people to do things. We want incentives for people to do things. Now let me give you an example of where taxes and regulation go awry. Do any of you have to pay the plastic bag tax when you buy something? Do they charge that here? What do you think of that?
Answer.
Come on.
It's really freaking annoying when I use the paper bags that always break.
Yeah, paper bags take more energy and, well, I just got some statistics from Fairfax County. They've raised $2.3 million from the tax, but it's not doing what it's supposed to do, because if you multiply that by 4 cents, or divide it by 4 cents, you come to 57 million. There's still 57 million bags that are going into the landfill. People are paying the tax here. And then when you divide by the number of households, it comes to about 3 a week. Now, maybe it's reduced some, but by and large, it's not good. It's basically raising money for environmental education, and these are good things, storm drain cleanup, but the county's wealthy enough, it doesn't need to do a tax. So that's just one example of things, and yet the environmental activists go around saying this is a success. Well, maybe it is a success in other states, but not here, at least not in Fairfax County. I would rather see that the grocers give a penny to people to return the bag. That would make more sense, because the goal of this is to get plastic out of the waste stream. It's not working. So that's an example of things. The other example was the Virginia Clean Economy Act, which basically requires us to be completely free of fossil fuels by a certain date, but also have moved to electric and hybrid cars. The goal is 35% by 2026. Well, it's only 5% now. We're not going to make that goal. We're just not. and there are a lot of, and what I think about mostly are these immigrant contractors who are driving around in maybe a beat-up old truck because that's what they can afford. It's a gas guzzler. And they're gonna be forced to, there's no electric trucks, are there? Are there electric, do contractors, they have electric panel
They're
trucks?
they're crap.
I don't think they do.
They're kind of crap. They don't.
Yeah. Right, the other thing is the 66 tolls. VDOT decided to make it HOV3. So that means you need 3 people in a car versus 2 to use it for free. Well, how are you gonna get 3 people in a car when you're just, let's say, driving with a friend or something? In fact, there's a woman out there, a lady out there in Manassas, who took a job out here, and she has twins, and the scanner keeps reading it as 2 people in the car, and she keeps getting dinged for bills. So one of the things that I think we need to do is give a rebate to people who are frequent users, because the congestion level on 66 is horrible still. And the reason why is because HOV2 can't use it for free. The tolls are very high, same on 495. So those are just some practical things that I'm thinking about, but also education. I mean, were any of you in high school during the lockdowns?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Video sucked.
Yes.
Do you think you're deficient in school? Hmm?
Well, I think what transpired is that the standards in high school were lowered to accommodate for
Oh,
lack
that's
of
nice.
effort.
Isn't that great?
What happened was the universities, because they received this influx of students who were not as effective in certain classes, they lowered their standards.
Well, that's what happened. They lowered the SOLs too, and in Providence District in Fairfax County, something like 65% of the schools are failing. So, like tonight I was at a back-to-school night, and the Democratic worker asked me, "What are you really that concerned about banning books in the library?" And I said to her, "Well, why aren't you asking about all the kids who are not succeeding in math and science?" I mean, this is what it's come to, is that you have, even the Republican Party does this. we get focused on narrow issues that get people headlines, and we forget the bigger issues. And in my view, the Democrats, by focusing on LGBTQ stuff, abortion even, and all these things, plastic, they're not really hitting the issues that concern people. They really aren't. I mean, the governor has proposed an abortion ban at 15 weeks, okay, under the Dobbs decision, with exceptions, including stating that if the health of the mother is at risk. The Democrats make it look like this is taking away a basic right to choice. Do you know how many abortions there are in Virginia after 15 weeks? Anybody want to guess? Please guess. I really want you to guess.
0?
No.
50 per year.
Probably.
I would guess more than that.
It's about 400. About 400.
Is that
Now,
per year?
yes, per year, but there's exceptions that he's offering. And yet the Democrats want to make this into a big, frightening issue. Do you realize that 54% of all abortions now are by medication? And that drug is approved for up to 10 weeks of pregnancy. Most abortions are now first trimester. When Roe was decided in 1973, it was a very different situation. We didn't have ultrasound, we didn't have home pregnancy tests. A lot of women, poor women especially, could go literally into the second trimester and not know they were carrying a child. Okay? Contraception was limited too. That's not the case today. And I, being someone who's covered the FDA, support preemption and the Commerce Clause of the Constitution. If you're a constitutional conservative, you would not want Virginia to come up with its own regulatory regime for abortion drugs or any drug. So I'm not in favor of getting rid of abortion drugs, and if I got elected, I wouldn't vote to remove them. You said, well, first of all, it won't last. The Fifth Circuit's looking at that case right now, if you didn't know. So, so the abortion issue is unfortunately being used as a wedge against us. Trump is being used against us. They're trying to blur the issue instead of focusing on things that matter. I mean, I was actually at Vienna Chamber of Commerce. I was talking to a woman, there was an attorney, And she said, well, I'm sorry, I can't vote for you because I support LGBTQ rights, I support abortion rights. I said, well, I'm running primarily on transportation and traffic congestion, which is killing us up here. It's still killing us, traffic congestion, and crime and schools. And she said to me, what can the government do about transportation? She actually said that. I mean, that's how people have become so brainwashed by the national media, including Fox News, including the conservative media, to think that we can't solve problems. We can solve problems. And that's why I'm running, is to solve problems, to help people have a better life here in Virginia. It doesn't mean more government, but it means making government work better. It means helping the private sector. And that's where I'm going to segue to talk about what you guys should do if you want to go into politics. I know it's fun to learn political science and everything, but if any of you really want to run someday, or any of you want to really contribute to society, you won't become a social justice warrior. You won't become someone who just hangs out, and protests and stops the, throws paint on paintings or interrupts the statue. There's a woman actually, did you know what happened about 5 years ago? Some woman protest Black Lives Matter actually pulled herself up in the Statue of Liberty on the 4th of July, thus ruining the chance of thousands of people to see the Statue of Liberty on the 4th of July to make that protest. You would go into business and create jobs, create wealth. That's the thing that we don't get credit for. The Democrats like to point to all these great social programs and all these and civil rights, and these were important things. But if you want to know what really, really increased the standard of living in the world and made poor people have a chance to live and not starve to death, it was capitalism. It was the Industrial Revolution, and it was free enterprise. And that's why millions of immigrants, John Sturge's here, that's why millions of people come to this country. Free enterprise. It's not like some city like in India, I hear it's very hard to start a business, you gotta go through some hoops. And that's what we have to talk about. We can't just talk about freedom in an abstract way. We have to talk about free enterprise. So for me, going into business for myself, I created jobs, I helped young people get careers, some old people too, freelance writers. And I had the time that I could be involved civically and also be at home with my kids. It was a home-based business for a lot of the time, you see. So my advice is to get into the business world, get into something where you can gain skills, in the engineering field or finance, investing, whatever. And then, start your own business. In fact, there's a friend I know, I don't know if he's a friend, he's actually an activist. He worked for Youngkin. And he was high up in the Youngkin campaign, and he didn't take a job in the administration. You know what he's doing now? He started a fencing business down in Virginia Beach. I said, what? And this guy was a real gung-ho activist. He was out there, getting volunteers, doing stuff for Youngkin, all these candidates. He was really into this stuff. Well, why did he go into the fencing business? He wants to make money so he can run for office. Look at Glenn Youngkin. He was at Carlyle Group, engineer at Rice, then he got his MBA at Harvard, and he's filthy rich, and he had the money to basically win the election and save Virginia from becoming Maryland or Illinois or something like that. What I find now is the fellow who I'm running against, named Saddam Salim, who actually graduated from GMU. I think he got his MBA there too. In the Democratic caucus, a lot of these people are not even business people anymore. I mean, Chap Peterson, who's the lawyer, has his own law firm, which is a business. I mean, he hires people. I mean, it's a business. And, basically the Democratic caucus, a lot of people who are public employees, teachers, things like that. I mean, I'm not denigrating that. But I really believe that, gaining skills in the workforce in some area that you love, and then thinking about entrepreneurship, that's what makes America great. That's really what makes these countries best in the world. We are the innovators of the world. We are the innovators, except Israel is now the innovator too, okay, so. But free enterprise, you see. Israel went from a socialist system, they got rid of a lot of the socialist stuff, and they're now pumping out all this technology and, intellectual property. So I'm running, and I need your help. I would love to get you to volunteer, and we can pull an upset here, maybe here in Fairfax County, because again, I am, oh, there goes the flag. I am in an unusual position of not just being annual Republican candidate. I got elected 4 times and I never lost an election in a blue area. So I think I can win this election. I really do. So I'm handing out that, so let me hand out this thing. I hope that you guys will sign up and help me. Go to my website, kenreid.org, and let's take some questions maybe, and I'll call you, and whoever works the hardest gets a job in Richmond with me. How's that? Yes. Any questions at all? I know John's here, so we got it.
I think we'll save. Okay, we'll have like
Oh, yes.
one question.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, so what, you said they're doing something with the criminal justice stuff?
Yeah, they basically got rid of cash bail, and John, is it $1,000 you can shoplift before you're thrown in jail?
I think it's $950.
$950, so you can now,
$950.
that's what's leading to smash and grab.
Yeah.
I mean, they also they prohibited principals from reporting to students who were committing low-level crimes. That's what led to the situation in Loudoun. They actually said in the grand jury report that they didn't think that these sexual assaults were sexual assaults, and they didn't need to report it to the police. I mean, we had it here in Fairfax Public Schools.
They're actually getting really creative with that, with the shoplifting statute. I work in a restaurant, just part-time, and I've actually heard my boss say a couple times, people will come in, order like $700 worth of food, and just dine and dash and not pay a check. It's
You may want to check on that. I think that, but I tell you right now, with a 6-year-old kid who shot his teacher in Newport News, that was one of the things. They didn't want to report that a 6-year-old kid was violent. I mean, we have a shortage of police officers. I mean, people don't want to be cops. They don't want to be police. I mean, we're in a serious problem right now just because of 2 years of regressive, liberal, pie in the sky, feel good stuff, which basically hurts people and students. The masking, Jack Peterson, who lost his Saline, part of the reason why he lost is he had an amendment to lift the mask ban. The teachers union didn't like that, even though all the evidence shows children were not carriers of COVID and children were not dying of COVID. I mean, really, really horrible stuff is happening, and they're going to try to divert attention to Trump and to, banning books, which is not what people are talking about, and all this stuff just to get people all frightened and keep voting Democrats so they can stay in office and stay in power. Anyway.
Yeah, so we're actually running a pretty tight schedule tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody want stickers? Anybody want
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
You're welcome. Nice to meet you, sir. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. So next up, we have John Stirrup, House Delegate and former member of the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you for
Prince William.
Sure. Thank you for doing what you did.
And, yeah, please welcome John Stirrup.